Hello, everybody. Welcome to Maker Monday with Cleveland Public Library and the Great Lakes Science Center. My name is Joy, and today we're going to see if we can answer the question, what if we had superpowers? So in order to do that, we're going to be learning a little bit more about light and shadow. So what do you think light is? Light is really cool because it's something that is all around us. So the fact that you can even see me right now means that there is light in this room. So light is something, it travels very quickly, and then it travels in a straight line, and it allows us to see things. So if I were to go and turn off all the lights in this room, you wouldn't be able to see me or my table or my book or my sign, nothing, just black screen. Now, shadow happens when a light source is blocked. So, for example, have you ever walked around outside before in the sun, and then you look down at the ground and you can see something on the ground that looks a lot like you? Just the outline of you, and maybe if you're walking around with someone, you can see their outline on the ground too. That's a shadow because you're blocking the sun, so there's a shadow in front of you on the ground. Now, we're going to take what we learned about light and shadow in a little bit and see if we can make something that helps us with our superpowers. Because all good superheroes need a few good tools to help them save the day. But before we build that, we need to think about the engineering design process. So just like superheroes, engineers follow their own process in order to get things done. So engineers and superheroes have something in common in that they all have a goal in mind. So that's something that they want to achieve. Now, there are a number of different ways that you can go about this process, whether it's starting with asking questions of what would happen if I do this? Why do you think this is happening? Or something like that, and then trying to figure out what to do. Or some people plan things through step by step from A to Z. They think through every single option of what to do, and then they move forward. Some people just want to jump right in and try things and put things together and see what happens. And that is okay because everybody learns and works and builds and engineers a little bit differently. Same thing with us being superheroes and having superpowers. Everyone's individual superpower is probably a little bit different. So all of these superheroes can work together to solve a problem with their own different strategy based on the engineering design process. And that is also okay because all of our superheroes and all of our engineers go back to the same step, and that is improve. Because not everything works right the first time. And it can be really frustrating when you think something is going to work perfectly and then you try it and then something goes wrong. But that is okay because what you can do is think about why didn't this work? And how can I make it better? And then you can improve and learn what does and does not work and why. So before we can use our engineering design process to figure out what we can make to help us with our superpowers, we need to figure out what our superpowers are. So does anyone have any idea what their own superpower is? Everyone has their own special superpower. And we're going to read this book to see if we can figure out what our own superpower is. So pay close attention in this book to see if you can find what each character's superpower is and see if any of them work with what you think your superpower might be. So let's read this story together. So What's My Superpower by Abiot Johnston, illustrated by Tim Mack. In a little house in the very middle of a small town where winter is always longer than summer, a little girl named Nalvana lived with her mother. Nalvana loved everything about her small town. She loved the quiet roads with lots of space to play hide and seek and tag and street hockey. She loved to ride her bike without worrying about cars coming down the road like big monsters. Anana, Nalvana said to her mother one day, if I had a superpower, I could fight big monsters, you know? Yes, Punik, her mother replied as she stroked Nalvana's hair. Do you think I'll ever have a superpower? Nalvana asked. I don't know, Punik. Maybe. her mother said with a smile. Nelvana always thought about what it would be like to have superpowers. Everywhere she went, she wore a yellow cape made from a blanket and a pair of snowmobiling goggles resting on her head. On the first day of school, Nelvana was in gym class when a boy named Davide ran into the gym so quickly he was just a blur. All the other kids tried to race him, but he was faster than all the kids in the class. Davide, you have a superpower, Nelvana excitedly told him. You can run faster than a ski-doo. Do you think that's true? Davide asked her, beaming. I know it's true, said Nelvana, but I wonder what my superpower is. Nelvana went home after school and told her mom all about Davide. He was so fast he almost burned the floor of the gym, Nelvana told her. He was like the wind on a blizzardy day. Wow, he really must have super speed, her mother replied. If Davide has a superpower, does that mean I can have a superpower too? Nelvana asked. I'm sure we will find out soon, her mom said. Nelvana imagined herself flying in the sky or talking to animals or even breathing underwater. The days began to grow colder, but that did not stop Nelvana from going to the playground to play with her friends. One day, Nelvana saw her friend Mata swinging so high that it looked like she was going to loop around the swing set. Nelvana and her friends all stared at Mata, amazed. Then suddenly, Mata was flying from the swing. She landed so far away that Nelvana was sure that Mata had flown through the air. You can fly, Nelvana said. Mata smiled widely. Really? She asked. Of course, Nelvana said. If you keep practicing, someday you'll be able to fly all the way around the world. When Nelvana went home that day, she told her mom about the amazing flying girl she had seen at the playground. She was flying? Her mom asked. Well, she was jumping very far, Nelvana explained. But I think she'll be able to fly for real if she keeps trying. Nelvana started jumping around the house, off the couch and the tables, trying to see if she could be like Mata. I don't think your superpower is flying, Punik, her mom said. But don't worry, we'll figure out what your special talent is soon. The next day, Nelvana and her friends brought their sleds to the big hill next to their school to go sliding. Nelvana's cousin, Jonasy, was already at the top of the hill building an inukshuk. All across the top of the hill, there were snow sculptures of animals and snowmen and even a whole igloo. Jonasy, did you make these? Nelvana asked. Yup, he said. All of them. Even that polar bear right there. It was easy. What else can you make? She asked. Anything. I can make a caribou and maybe even a monkey. I can make things out of rocks and even ice. Is it your superpower to make things? Nelvana asked. Can you build whatever you can think of? Yup, he replied. I can build anything. Nelvana told her mom all about Jonasy's superpower. Punik, didn't you know that Jonasy's dad has that superpower too? Jonasy is going to be a carver, just like his father. Does that mean I might have that superpower too? Nelvana asked. I've never tried to build anything before. Why don't you try it out? Her mom said. Nelvana tried to build an inukshuk out of her blocks, but it fell over. She tried to make a house out of her Legos, but it was too hard. She sighed. I guess it's not my superpower. Her mom hugged her tight. I'm sure we'll figure it out soon, Punik. Nelvana kept finding friends who had superpowers whenever she went out to play. When she went swimming in the spring, she met a boy named Adami who could hold his breath underwater longer than anyone else. They were playing games in the water, and Nelvana wanted to see who could hold their breath the longest. She thought she had been under the water for minutes, but after she ran out of breath and came up to the surface, Adami stayed underwater for much longer. When he finally came up, Nelvana said, You can hold your breath for a really long time. That must be your superpower. Do you think so? Adami said. I know so, Nalvana said. Cool, Adami said. It's like I'm half fish. Nalvana was happy for her friends. They had all found the things that they were good at. She liked to tell them they had superpowers, and she liked to see them smile. They all seemed so happy to have a special talent. But Nalvana wished she knew what her superpower was. Anana, Nalvana said when she came home from school one day, I still don't know what my superpower is. Am I ever going to figure it out? Her mom gave her a big smile. I think I know what your superpower is, Punik, she said. Nalvana looked up at her mom, excited but confused. What is it? Can I fly like Mata? Or am I really strong? No, Punik, can't you see? Her mother asked as she hugged Nalvana close. Your superpower is making people feel good about themselves. Nalvana smiled. I think that's a good superpower to have, she said. The end. So, what superpowers did you notice in the story? So let's see, there was super speed, there was flying, there was holding your breath for a really long time underwater, there was the ability to build things really, really well, and there's the superpower to make people feel good about themselves. So a superpower can be absolutely anything you're good at. So maybe you can run really, really fast, just like one of the characters in the story, or maybe you're really, really strong. I think that I have super science powers because I have the power to do A, really cool things with science, and B, I can look at a situation and ask a lot of questions and use the engineering design process to see if I can figure out a solution. And just by doing these Maker Monday activities with me, you all have super science powers too, which is pretty darn awesome. But here's the thing. You could have more than one superpower. So just because you have super science powers now doesn't mean that you don't also have other superpowers. So, I think I'm pretty strong, so maybe my superpower is super science powers and super strength. I don't know. So the thing about superpowers is we need a way for people to tell us when it's time to use them to save the day or help someone. So we're going to see if we can make a superhero signal that helps people find us and get a hold of us if they need help. So there are lots of different types of superhero signals. If you've ever seen any Batman movies or cartoons, he has the bat signal, right? That shines some light up in the sky so that way when Batman sees it, he can go spring into action. So we're going to see if we can make our own version of our own superhero signal using what we've learned about light and shadow and our super science powers. So let's take a look at the materials that we have. So we have scissors, which if you are following these Maker Monday videos, you know are my arch nemesis. It's going to be fun. Always be safe with scissors. Always, always, always be safe with scissors. I am very safe with scissors. It's just tape and scissors and we struggle. But that's okay because I use the engineering design process to see if I can improve on my tape and scissors related issues. And so I have Scotch tape. Any tape will work. I like Scotch tape because one, there's a little rippy thing on the end so I don't have to worry about cutting it. And it's also thinner and lighter than a lot of other tapes. So it's easier to work with the paper that we're going to be working with. I have a pencil, so that way I can draw my design. I have a light source. This is a flashlight. I'm going to be using that in a little bit. But I'm going to be using a piece of cardstock to make my superhero signal. Now we're using cardstock instead of regular paper because our superhero signal is going to be based on light and shadow. Now how light travels is, like I said, it travels in a straight line very, very, very quickly. That's why it doesn't really, unless there's something for the light to bounce off of, it doesn't really bend around corners or anything. Now, we're going to use this to create shadows, which, cool thing, you can actually see a shadow right now. Take a look at your screen. Can anyone see the shadow that's actually on your screen right now? It is right there behind my sign. Now the cardstock is a good choice for the same reason that the sign right here is creating the shadow back here. So this cardstock and my sign are materials that are something called opaque. And because they're opaque, the light is not traveling through it. So the sign is blocking the lights that are up there, which is why the shadow is cast back here. And we know that light, it's not going to travel through this cardstock because it's so thick and opaque. Now, there's other types of materials. There's some materials that are translucent, and translucent means that like light can kind of travel through, not very well, but it's possible, which is why we are not using regular paper. So light can kind of travel through regular paper, kind of, sort of, like if I were to shine a light through this sheet of paper back here, you can see it kind of goes through. So it might create somewhat of a shadow, but it won't be a very good shadow. And for a superhero signal, we need a super shadow. So that's a translucent thing. So things like clouded glass or paper, lampshades even, things that light can kind of travel through, but not super well. And then there's other materials that light just goes straight through, and those are transparent. So that's things like clear glass, air, clear water, things that light just goes right through are transparent. So we're using cardstock because it is opaque. So yeah, you can see like the light barely gets through, not even that well. So I think that that's going to be our best bet to make our superhero signal. Now, your superhero signal can be whatever you want it to be. So go ahead, grab your materials, and I'm going to make my superhero signal right now, and I want you all at home to make one along with me, so that way we can form our own super cool legion of science superheroes. It's going to be awesome. So think about, as you're designing, what do you want to include in your superhero signal? Do you want it to be a reference to your superpower? Do you want it to be based on your name? Do you just want it to look cool because it's cool? I don't know. So I think that I'm going to make my superhero signal look like a star, because why not? Stars are cool. So I'm going to draw a star. Now, as you're drawing your superhero signal out, think about what we're doing. We're going to use these signals to block the light, so that way we can make a shadow. So you can even experiment with different shapes. You can cut things out of your main shape. You can make giant letters if you want to make your name. Think about how you want your shadow to show up, and what you want to be in your shadow and what you don't want to be in your shadow. So I made my star, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. Remembering to use good scissors safety, watching our fingers, because we don't want to get a cut on our fingers with our scissors. This might be a good thing for a grown-up to help you with, especially if your design is very, very elaborate, which there's nothing wrong with that. And hey, grown-ups at home, if you want, you can make your own superhero signals too. Because we can all be superheroes. You're never too old to be a superhero. So I'm making my star like so. There's lots of points on a star. I have determined. So when you're making your superhero signals, you want to make sure that they're big enough so that way you can see the shape, but not so big that you can't get the whole thing in the light source and you won't be able to see the full thing. And if you make a design and you decide you don't like it, remember, you're engineers. You can go back and decide to change it. So I have my star right here. But I'm going to see if I can make this even fancier. And I think I'm going to try and cut. So like I said, my name is Joy, so I'm going to see if I can put a J right in the middle of my star and cut it out. Now this is probably going to be a little bit tricky, and that's okay. Said yours does not have to be this complicated. And the cool thing about cutting this out is hopefully, if what I'm picturing in my mind happens, the star will be a shadow, but because the light will pass through the J, that'll be light on my wall. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. So I gotta cut a hole in there. Said you do not need to make it this complicated. Or you can make it even more complicated than this if you want. It is up to you. I am going to cut out a J, being very, very careful because I don't want to rip my star. If you do rip your signal, you have tape, so you can fix it. But we're going to also use the tape for another activity after we're done with our signal. So I cut out my J to allow the light to pass through. We're going to just move that, maneuver that around. So it's very, very tricky as we cut this out. Lots of curves. Lots of curves. Curves are hard, especially when you're trying to be precise. So if I were doing the plan stage instead of just the create stage, I probably would not have made my J this tiny because tiny curves are really hard to cut out. But now I know for next time I make a superhero signal, how to improve on my strategy. I don't want to throw this whole thing away just yet. I want to see if I can make it work. There we go. So I have my star with a J in it. So that way I know that if someone's calling this star, it is my star. So you keep working on your superhero signals. I'm going to make another one just so that way we can compare and contrast. See, what do you think I should make? I think I'm going to go, let's see, what's something cool and science-y? I think I'm going to go with a magnifying glass. Because why not? That's very science-y. Scientists use magnifying glasses to investigate stuff. So we have my magnifying glass, like so, like so. So I'm going to cut that out. You coming up with some cool superhero signals at home? I have lots of ideas, but I only have so much cardstock. So let's see, I'm going to cut out my magnifying glass. And you can make as many superhero signals as you want. Just because Batman only had one bat signal doesn't mean that you can't have multiple. Let's see, I'm going to cut out my magnifying glass, like so. So I have my magnifying glass, but I think I'm going to cut out the lens so that way I can actually see through it and add another cool element to my shadow. Now, the way that I'm cutting shapes out that are inside of all other shapes is what I'm doing is I'm kind of just folding where I want cut. So you can see I drew out this lens here. So I'm just folding part of the thing that I want cut, and part of the thing, the section that I'm cutting away, I'm just doing a little snip. So you see I snipped in that middle section. Well, that's going to be, leaving my magnifying glass. So it doesn't really matter that I cut it. But then that way I can cut from inside of my magnifying glass. And that's how I cut my J out as well. Now, if you have a grown-up helping you, this would be a great time for your grown-up to help you out because it's a little tricky. Because you don't want to cut out something that you're keeping. And this way you can just cut out the thing that you're getting rid of. So let's see, I'm cutting my magnifying glass like so. So let's see, I have now two superhero signals. I have my magnifying glass. I can like investigate things. It's my super science investigative. This is how I know when they want me to investigate. They shine up the magnifying glass superhero signal, and I have my J, so that way I know that they are calling me to come save the day. So keep working on those superhero signals. If yours is not done, that is okay. But let's think about how we can make these work. So I could throw them up in the sky and hit myself in the head and then the arm. But see, I don't know if I'd be able to spot that from really far away because it's just, or I mean, I could hope that it hits me in the face every time. But not everyone has the best aim in the world. So they could someone could throw this signal to come find me and it could land like over in like Iowa. I don't live in Iowa. So I think that I need a better way to make this signal work. So think about what we learned about light and shadow. So I wonder if I can use this to make my shadow, because remember, this blocks the light, which is why this shadow right here is happening. I mentioned that this could block light because it's opaque. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my light source. So I mean, I could hold it up to the ceiling, but I think it might work out a little better if I use a flashlight. So I'm going to turn my lights off, so that way you can see this a little bit better. So it's a little bit darker in here now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shine my light, like so, over my superhero signal. Now, if you look at the table, can you see how that's working? You can see how my star with my J, you can see the signal on the table. Or what about my magnifying glass? There we go. You can see the magnifying glass because I'm shining the light and this is blocking it. But I'm going to go over here and see if I can project it onto the wall and make it any bigger. So you can even see right now my shadow right here. So even though my lights are off, there's still light coming in this room from my monitor over there. There's a room right over there. So there's still some light coming in. And because I'm blocking that light, you can see my shadow on the wall. So let's see if I can make my superhero signal appear on the wall behind me. And there it is. There's my superhero signal on the wall. There's my star with my J. I'm going to back up and see if I can make it any bigger. So I can make it bigger, just like that. So let's see what happens with my magnifying glass. And there it is. So by holding my superhero signal in between my light and the wall, I'm making my signal appear, and it actually looks much bigger than it actually is. Because you can see this is a tiny little paper thing, and on the wall, it looks much, much bigger. So let's see what we can do to make the size of the superhero signal change. Because you might need to see it from really far away. So let me grab my light. So I have right here, you can see how I'm holding it. My flashlight is just out of your frame. Take a step in so you can see where my flashlight is. There we go. So the flashlight's right there. And now you can see how big my superhero signal is. It looks much, much bigger than the actual thing. But let's see what happens if I move the flashlight further away. Looks a little bit smaller, still pretty big. But let's see what happens if we move it. Looks a little bit bigger now. So what's cool is we can change how our superhero signal looks just by moving where our signal is in relation to the flashlight, like that. And the other thing, if you notice, you can see my J through my star. Now, think about what we talked about, why this works, for why this is happening. So when I'm shining my light directly on my signal, there it is, back on my table. Let's look at our table one more time. So I'm looking at directly on the signal. Now, the star, remember, that's opaque. So because the star is opaque, it's blocking the light from reaching the table, which is why it casts that star-shaped shadow. But my J is cut out. So because the J is cut out, the light can pass through, so there's no shadow there. It's just straight through light. So if I can make this look different based on where I hold it, let's see what I can do with my magnifying glass signal. So that's what it looks like right there. So now I'm going to put that on the wall, and we're going to see what happens when I move my magnifying glass back and forth, just like I did with my star. So we got my light, and we have my magnifying glass right there. You can see it right there. If I move it closer, you can see it's sort of the light spot in the lens gets a lot bigger because it's closer. But if I move it further away, it looks a little bit smaller. So it's really, really cool how we can manipulate or alter the shadow based on how we're holding our superhero signal. So this is all pretty cool. So you can keep on working on your superhero signals if you're not done yet, don't worry. But I want to see what else we can do with shadows. So these are two-dimensional superhero signals, and we found a way to project their shadows and make them really, really big, so that way we could see them and then know that someone needs our help with our superpowers, and we can go save the day. But I wonder if we can make a three-dimensional superhero signal. So these are 2D, they're flat, but not everything is flat. So like this is three-dimensional, it's not flat. This has length and width and height. It's not just a flat piece of paper. So I'm going to see if I can make a three-dimensional object, and we're going to see if that affects how it shows up on the wall. So if you're still working on your superhero signals, keep doing that. If you want to try this challenge as well, go ahead and try it with me. So I think I'm going to do something simple. I think I'm going to do a pyramid, because why not? So the trick to a pyramid is making sure you have a good base, and then making sure that you have your 4 sides. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my paper in 4 pieces like this, so that way all of my triangles are the same. And I'm going to make my triangles. Now, an extra challenge on top of this 3D challenge is see if you can make something that looks like one thing when you hold it up, but it looks like something else on the wall. So think about shadow puppets. Has anyone ever tried to make a shadow puppet before? That's a really great way that you can experiment with shadows and making 3D objects look different. So like you could do something like this, and it just looks like your hand is just weirdly curled, but on the wall it might look like a dog. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure like these are ears and like that's a mouth. I don't know. So that's the cool thing about shadows, is they can make things look really, really interesting. So I've got my triangles. And now I have to cut them in half so that way they're actually triangles and not 2 diamonds. And then I'm going to tape them together to make my pyramid. Like so. So that's what I'm going to use my Scotch tape for. So I can tape the sides together. And I want to see if I can tape them together so that way no light will get through, because I want to see if I can keep it opaque and create that shadow and not a weird kind of like sliver of light situation. So let's see, I've got one side taped. Ah! So apparently my struggles with tape include Scotch tape. Scissors and tape, like if I was a superhero, those would be my arch enemies. Turns out, you don't need 4 triangles to make a pyramid. You can use 4. You could also use 3. It depends on how big you want your pyramid to be. I think I'm going to use 3 and then put my 4th triangle on the bottom. So if you were to use 4 triangles to make the top of your pyramid, you need a square base. But because I'm going to use 3, I can use a triangle base because I have 3 sides instead of 4. Geometry lesson. So you get that taped. So that way all my sides are together. And then I will have my 3D pyramid as soon as I get this taped. So right now it's just a trapezoid, this 2D trapezoid. But if I fold these 2 ends together, it's a 3D pyramid. Let me get my tape on there. Come on, stick. Okay, so I want to put a little bit more tape on the inside to make sure that it is nice and strong. And then I need to put my base on. So I have my open base right there. So I'm just going to put the base on the bottom. That way it doesn't really matter how I hold it. I always have my pyramid. Like so. Now the pyramid, I know it has nothing to do with my super science powers. I just think they look cool. That's really what it boils down to. And that's the cool thing, because this is your design and you're the engineer. If you don't want your superhero signal to have anything to do with your superpowers and you just want to make a shape because you think it looks cool, you can do that. That's why I'm making my pyramid. I just think they look cool. And also, I don't know how to make super intricate designs. I mean, I could sit here and make the Statue of Liberty out of cardstock. That would be super cool. It would also take a very, very long time. All right, so I have my pyramid, like so. Now let's test it and see what happens if I try to use this shape to make my shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the lights off again. And then grab my light. Let's see, so if I hold it in the light, I can get it in the frame. There we go. It doesn't really look like a pyramid in my shadow. And what's really cool is it looks different depending on how I hold it. So take a look on my wall. I'm going to hold up my light source. So we have this triangle thing right here. And then if I change it, there's more of a diamond shape. And then I can transform it into this triangle. And then I can transform it again. So what's cool about a 3-dimensional shape like this is every single way I turn it, it casts a different shadow because the light is interacting with the different opaque parts of this pyramid. And if you were to make all sorts of really cool designs, not just a pyramid, who knows what kind of really cool shapes and shadows you would be able to create for your superhero signals. So we have learned today a whole bunch of stuff about light and shadow and how we can make both of them work together to create both 2D superhero signals that will help people call us to save the day. And also, we looked at some ideas for how we can make some really cool 3-dimensional objects. And who knows, maybe you'll find a way to figure out how to turn our three-dimensional object into a superhero signal as well. So maybe you'll figure out a design for a three-dimensional object that when it's turned one way, it calls you, and when it's turned another way, it can call one of your super friends. And if it changes a lot, it can call a whole bunch of superheroes to save the day all at once, which would be very, very handy. So keep building those superhero signals. See what sort of cool designs you can come up with, and think about what superpowers you already have. And then, once you're done with that, make sure you check back right here for next week's Maker Monday episode, where we're going to explore another really cool science topic and see if we can answer some more of those questions. So, keep creating, have fun, and until next time, stay curious.